have done an exceptional job of making the city ready. I'd also like to thank our taxi drivers, our hotel and restaurant employees, who have really created an environment of total Southern hospitality. I've been hearing it all over. The city is doing very, very well. And I once again want to thank our police officers. I think under very difficult situations, they are handling themselves with a maximum amount of restraint, and yet they're providing protection, and they are making it possible for people to have both their right to express their views without violence, and they are accommodating an enormous diversity of viewpoints, and that's no easy task. So we're very grateful. We've also been joined by the President of the City Council, City Council President Marvin Arrington, and would you care to have an opening statement of some sort? We're joined also by Mr. Walters of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. That's been involved in our restoration of Auburn Avenue, which Marvin Arrington has spearheaded. And Marvin, won't you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you. The tone of this convention has been total cooperation. I've been extremely pleased to hear the comments by the visitors about the atmosphere, what we're doing. We're just so pleased to have this convention in our city and know that it makes a historical impact. We talk about Auburn Avenue, and I simply wanted to mention a few key points to let you know that Auburn Avenue is going well. The economics of it is that Auburn Avenue is important to us because that's where the first black-owned bank was founded at, CTB. The first black-owned saving and loan association, Mutual Federal. The first black-owned radio station, WERD. The first black-owned, wholly owned insurance company, Atlanta Life Insurance Company. The first black-owned daily newspaper, the Atlanta Daily World. Black professionals were abundant. Prominent doctors, dentists, lawyers, accountants, businessmen were housed there on Auburn Avenue. Back in old days, we had restaurant and entertainment centers, such as Henry Grill, Jenkins Steakhouse, Hawks Dinette, Rib Shack, BB Beeman, and have always had excellent entertainment, such as the Royal Peacock and the Casino Lounge. And needless to say, we have had and do have some outstanding churches on Auburn Avenue, Queek Street, Big Bethel, Ebenezer, and Butler Street, CME. So we're doing the revitalization of Auburn Avenue. We have funds in place now to demolish the Herndon building, and hopefully that will take place in the next 90 to 120 days. There's going to be new life. There's going to be a new spirit. Auburn Avenue will never be like it was before, but we're talking about a new Auburn Avenue that has a new heritage. So we're just looking forward to being an integral part of that. We got certain projects under the way: municipal market renovation, municipal market park and development, land acquisition, lot construction, state farmers market development. Plans are being developed. Government efforts, state, county, and city are being involved. Street improvement, and you should have seen some of this in the last 15 days. New lighting and traffic signals, utility lines consolidation, historical 4K, new Black Research Library, County, Apex Museum, Artsfellow Tower, Artsfellow Annex, and a new police substation, which we have not sold on as of yet, Mr. Holmes, and the new King Center in general. So we are doing some things, and we're just pleased to share with you some of the things we're doing in our city, one of the greatest cities in the world, the city of Atlanta. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Any questions to Council President about Marvin Arrington? We hope you get an opportunity to go down to Auburn Avenue about noon today, as the Atlanta 88 Host Committee has a welcome and reception at the Martin Luther King Center today that starts about 11, I think, to 2. Any questions about last night's activities? I just thought that it was a great opening. I was really thrilled at the keynote address, as well as the address of President Carter that just seemed to touch all bases and touch them very right. Would you go to the microphone and give your name, please? So,
hi, I'm David McCormick with Newhouse Newspapers. Do you think that that tone will continue?
oh, I'm sure it will. I think what we'll have tonight is something that's probably very important in a democratic process. I think that when Jesse Jackson speaks this evening, I think you will begin to see something of the vision, something of the moral fervor, and something of the commitment, as he says, to make America stronger by making America better. And whether or not those issues pass on the platform, those issues will dominate the thinking of our party for many years to come. And many of the things that are not particularly acceptable now are far more acceptable and likely to be passed by a newly elected Congress in 1989. We have two microphones if you want to begin to move to either one of them.
My name is Jim Galloway. I'm with the Journal-Constitution. It's a local newspaper. Two questions. Number one, could you spell out your role as guarantor in this temporary agreement between John Portman and the Janitors Union?
Yeah, the role that I offered was not accepted in the midst of the negotiations, and then when I got out of the way, independent of me, they reached some sort of accord. So I have made no guarantees. I do continue to offer my involvement in helping to facilitate any conversations that will lead us toward a solution. But as of now, I've made no commitments to either one, other than the commitments that I made that were not accepted at the time that I made them.
Which were?
That on the points at which they differed, well, if they didn't accept them, they're not relevant.
But they may be interesting.
Well, but it goes into too much of the details of their negotiations, and I really don't know what they've done since then. But I simply said I would be available. And actually, most of the points of difference were not points of difference that were true in the present. They were things that might happen down the road. I was readily agreeable to them because I think that if they ever begin to communicate seriously, that I wouldn't need to be involved in it at all. And that seems to be what they've done.
And have you got any indication that the MARTA strike, the MARTA pickets are having any effect?
The MARTA situation is just an embarrassment, mostly for MARTA and the Transit Workers Union. It's a public advertisement, it seems to me, of incompetence. That as good a job as MARTA has done in the brick and mortar and the laying the rail and the meeting of the schedule, they've just not done a decent job of communicating with their employees. And the union itself is bush league because it doesn't seem to have a stable decision-making policy process. We deserve better from both the union and MARTA.
One last obligatory Jackson question. What do you think of the Jackson-Dukakis agreement or lack of agreement? I mean,
I think it's a very mature political agreement that probably is in the best interest of both of them and also the nation. The one thing I think Jesse Jackson realizes that maybe some of his supporters don't realize is that there's nothing that a convention can give you. A convention has power only within the party. And if that party doesn't win the election, then anything it promises is in vain. And the important thing, I think, that was agreed upon is that we would go on out here together and win this election. And then in the process of winning the election, there would be continual communication and involvement. I think that being wise enough to understand that is very much to the credit of both of these gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, Andy Trier from CBS News. There are grumblings out among the protesters that where you've put them does not allow them to protest properly and that they're out of sight from the delegates. As a former protester yourself, what do you feel about this and why put them there? And has it worked if there was a purpose behind it?
Well, at San Francisco, they were 2 blocks away, and New York, I never saw them. They're right across the street. In Chicago, where all the difficulty occurred, it occurred downtown, completely away from the McCormick Place. This is probably as close. I think what people don't realize is that demonstrations tend to lose their effectiveness if they are simply repeating things that they've done over and over again, and getting louder and more disruptive doesn't make them more effective. It's not, I mean, it was news in the South 25, 30 years ago when people marched. It's not news anymore. There are marches every 3rd day in Atlanta. And it's not that they're not getting any attention, it's that they're marching at the wrong place to some extent. That most of the problems about which they're complaining should be addressed in New Orleans. We're out of power and out of influence for so long that anybody that's got any complaints shouldn't have them with us. And those who want to participate and be involved in the process of decision making within the Democratic Party have always been welcome and are, you know, we hear what they're saying. And even the extremists in the Alternative 88, when they talk clearly, as I heard a young woman doing on the radio the other day, it makes sense. I understand what they're saying. But shouting and jumping up and down and being obnoxious doesn't communicate anymore. And I think we've just got to find, hopefully, more effective ways to communicate.
Could they be more effective if the city allowed them to reach the decision makers in the party and have access to them where they demonstrate, rather than being surrounded by policemen in a kind of a pit area?
Well, I think everybody that has to come in there has to come by that parking lot. And it was the unruly behavior of the demonstrators on Sunday that called out that large number of police. And it's unfortunate that that happened that way. But we do, you know, believe in the right of people to peacefully protest. And we are doing everything we can do to protect that right. We don't think anybody has the right to disrupt the convention.
David McCormick with Newhouse again. Your role and visibility at this event so far seems to go above and beyond that normally associated even with host city mayors. What does that have to do with your future ambitions beyond 1989, and could you speak to what those ambitions might be, either in a Dukakis administration or a Bush administration?
I would have absolutely no interest in, and there will not be a Bush administration. The lady told you last night that dog won't hunt. And, but in a Dukakis administration, I have no ambitions or desires. I'm very happy as mayor of this city, And if I have an expanded role, which I don't know that my role is much different than Dianne Feinstein's in San Francisco. I thought her role was very appropriate. I've tried, for the most part, to emulate that role and to be a good host. I've not been in the negotiations. I've tried to stay out of the politics as much as possible, and have only been pulled into it basically by the media. In terms of being able to maintain lines of communication with all of the parties in the convention, at every level I've attempted to do that. But I'm primarily concerned with getting this week behind us and then electing a president.
If I may follow up, you're happy being mayor through your term, which expires in 1989. It's spoken that you're considering a race for governor, perhaps. What's ahead for you after 1989?
Well, you know, I really don't know. And I make no bones about it. I think one of the most challenging things I could do in life would be to try to see if some of the things that we've been able to do here in Atlanta would work around the state. Could we help Savannah, Albany, Dalton, Columbus, Macon, little towns like Hawkinsville, to develop their industry and their jobs and their housing? I would love to be involved in that challenge, but that's about a year, 5 months, and about 11 days from now. And I have never known what I'm doing that far in advance. But you can't do anything if you don't do a good job with what you're doing today and tomorrow. And that's what I've tried to concentrate on. But I don't try to hide the fact that I would be extremely challenged by the opportunity to be governor of Georgia. But whether I should do that or whether I could do that, whether the people would want me to do that, I have no idea, and I haven't even tried to find out in any formal attempts at organization or polling or anything like that.
Mr. Mayor, Philip Reed from the Gay Cable Network. We had spoken the other night. Could you give me your opinion of the Democratic platform and whether or not you think that there should be a platform in there endorsing anti-discrimination legislation for PWAs, people with AIDS?
Mm-hmm. Let me say that my position about the platform on all issues, that if something doesn't help you get elected, it doesn't belong in the platform.
Well,
and I think the record of the Democratic Party on discrimination is a general principle to which we adhere, and to which we can unite the party and win an election. But when we start singling out everything against which we want to avoid discrimination, immediately we create doubts and we create questions. I said, well, I don't mind that, but I wonder about that. And that's a technique for losing elections, and I have absolutely no interest in losing this election, and I hope nobody else around here does.
well, if I may localize that question, would you endorse legislation here in the city of Atlanta to protect people with AIDS from discrimination?
We may even have it, I'm not sure, but we don't tolerate discrimination of any sort.
Well, in what you had said a moment ago, I mean, one of the classic arguments against women's rights, black rights, and anybody else's rights is that they have general rights, but it's been proven historically, if we look at bias-related violence, if we look at the statistics from the President's Commission on HIV infection, that in fact the most important thing that we can do right now until we find a cure for AIDS is to protect people who may come down with the virus. And the recommendation is to have strong anti-discrimination legislation. Would you, if you find that you don't have it on the books, would you endorse that sort of legislation?
I would certainly endorse legislation against discrimination.
Discrimination against people with AIDS.
AIDS, yes. It's, well,
But you don't feel that that's necessary.
well, what I think we've done in the city of Atlanta is try to keep this community together and educate them about AIDS. When people know about AIDS and know that it doesn't get communicated through casual contact, then that in itself is an effective measure of avoiding discrimination against people with AIDS.
Yes, but
may I finish? We pull this entire community together, some 80 different companies, and a full cross-section of the community in support of a fundraiser for treatment and research in AIDS. We've raised this week about $500,000, and we are able to keep our community together and move them forward. Now, if you create an issue which divides them and tries to get them being very specific and particular, I think you're going to disrupt an alienation process, and you're maybe going to set back the very thing that you're trying to do. We have a way of doing things here in Atlanta, and we're succeeding, and we really would like to continue doing them the way we're doing them.
Well, if I may follow that up with one last question, Your Honor, it sounds to me like I remember in the 25 years ago that I was told that black and white people got along just fine in this city and in the South and in much of the country, and that we didn't need that legislation because if we all just did it, you know, on an informal basis, everything would be fine. You were in the forefront of recognizing that that was baloney and that that would not be the way to do it. There are people out here who are not having their jobs protected, that they are being fired, they are being told they can't have housing because they are perceived to have AIDS. They may not even have AIDS. Mm-hmm. On that basis, would you think that we need to have legislation that goes beyond what the helping hand might be, but becomes the hand of the city and says, we're not going to tolerate that?
I have said that. I have said that we don't tolerate discrimination against people with AIDS.
So you'd endorse legislation for that?
I would take a good, serious look at legislation to that effect.
Thank you.
To belabor one last time this question of your future, it's often reported that one of the posts you might be interested in is president of the World Bank. Could you speak to those reports and what such a post would mean to you?
No, let me say that I have always been interested in the task of global development. And I served on the banking committee as in Congress, and I was involved in legislation funding the World Bank and the International Development Agency, and that's been an interest of mine. There are many interests of mine. But there's no way I can lobby for anything, and I've never lobbied for a job in my life. You know, if it's something I can run for, I can make the decision to run for it. If I'm asked to do something and I feel that it's something that really needs doing and that I'm, you know, qualified to do it, I wouldn't hesitate to accept a responsibility like that. But I couldn't, I don't know how realistic it is in any respect. I find that I don't get invited to do things until they're really in trouble. If something's all messed up and nobody else wants it, then you know, I might get asked to try to straighten it out and take it on. And if that's the case with almost any task, I would be willing to accept those kinds of challenges. I've thrived on those kinds of challenges in life. But the World Bank right now seems to be going fairly well. I think that Barbara Conable and before him Clausen, one coming out of the Congress, one coming out of the banking business, have gotten the World Bank on a fairly reasonable footing. If there was a political challenge pertaining to development or trade, I would be willing to, you know, to consider something like that. But in terms of my own control of my life, I would much prefer to stay here in Atlanta. Yes.
Jack Walter from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. A couple of weeks ago when we saw you, the city had just completed a lengthy planning process in historic preservation. I simply wanted to ask how you think it's going to fare in the city council. The president had been here a few minutes ago. I'm sorry I missed him.
Thank you. Well, I think the plan that we presented to the city council was an outgrowth of almost a year of serious meetings between the preservation community, the development community, and the city government. And it was a long and hard and well defined consensus. And there are 5 members of the city council that served on that committee. Frankly, we're hoping to introduce it with more than 10 signatures, which would guarantee its unanimous passage.
Yeah, Sam Andriano, Chicago South Shore Scene. What policies, if any, should be employed by the state or federal government to ensure that there isn't a decline or lack of education in the public schools, such as in the Chicago school system?
Well, Governor Joe Frank Harris has endorsed and promoted a program of quality basic education. We in the city of Atlanta have done a number of things. One, we made almost every program of the federal government in public education work. Teacher aides going from welfare mothers to back to school to become teachers, the teacher corps developing a corps of master teachers in public education. We try to put the emphasis on the students and what we can do to inspire our students to work a little harder. One of the reasons why I'm interested in the 1996 Olympics is that I'm convinced that discipline is not something that you're going to share with young people just in relationship to books, that you're not going to get kids not to use drugs by just saying, just say no. You've got to give them something around which to organize and discipline their lives and make a commitment. And a commitment to physical and intellectual excellence, I think, go together. And so we have found that one of the major assets that we have in attracting new business to our state is our educational system. We also know that one of the major difficulties we might face in the future, as every American city will, is a workforce that is not sufficiently educated to work in an information society. I saw recently a report that in North Carolina, but the same could be true of Georgia, that they had to hire workers who had graduate degrees in mathematics to perform tasks that in Japan are done by high school graduates. But not only could high school graduates not do them in North Carolina, but neither could most college graduates. They had to get graduate students in math to do the things that high school graduates are doing in Japan. Well, if you're going to compete with Japan, you've got to have students that are coming out of high school capable of coping with an information society and the demands of the kind of industry that we're going to have. Now, the city of Atlanta has a daycare program where we are starting our 4- and 5-year-olds teaching themselves to read and write on computers. And one of the things we've done in our public education system is every public school in the city of Atlanta has a writing to read program in first grade. The city of Atlanta, in its daycare centers, starts that program in kindergarten. And I think we're just going to have to make the commitment of a total society. I think it's more than legislation. I think it's more than money. I think the private sector has got to be supportive of public education. I think local governments and families are going to have to give the school the prestige and authority that it had when our parents were children. It had even lost it by the time I was a child, and that's a long time ago.
Do you feel that the federal government should step in at any time if the teachers and the state aren't able to come to any resolutions?
Well, I think the federal government clearly has a role in education, and I would say that that role primarily is in providing money to the states and cities for salaries for teachers. I think that we've got to elevate the teaching profession, and I would certainly support federal involvement in increased funding of teachers' salaries. But I think the curriculum and the inspiration for public education still comes primarily from the local community.
Thank you.
And the states. Mm-hmm.
Monica Guy with WSB-TV in Atlanta. How much has the city had to revamp their security plans to deal with the protesters or the congestion downtown?
Well, I think we were very well prepared for the congestion downtown, and that seems to be functioning very well. I was impressed with the way people were able to get out of the Omni into their hotels last night. That worked extremely well. I think we were prepared for the protesters if the protesters had been reasonable and nonviolent. When there was a threat of violence, we had to revamp the plans. I understand we had to make some arrests this morning. All of that was part of our contingency plan. We just hope we don't have to use it all. But we have enough security to meet our security needs. But security is something that you really have more of it if you don't have to use it. The less you have to use it, the more you have. So we would still hope that there would be voluntary restraint and nonviolent protest on the part of all of the persons who are attempting to involve themselves. They need to remember that while maybe in the confusion of the Democratic Party in 1968, there's no question that the party lost face in that, but every one of those demonstrations that became violent failed. And violence is counterproductive. And if people want to communicate with this nation, they really have to do it with order and with intelligence, and not with noise and violence. We say as preachers sometime, you know, point weak, pound like hell. The weaker you point, the more noise you have to make. If you have a powerful point, you can state it quietly and effectively, and you can get change.
If things were to get more volatile this week, do you feel comfortable with what we've already planned and whatever the backup plans you have for security here? Do you think that they would handle it, or would we need to go out and recruit more people in here to handle it?
No, I think we have all of the people we need. I think the local police are with the support of the State Patrol and the GBI and our Corrections Department has done a very, very adequate job, and I can't speak too highly of them.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.